Hello and welcome to another episode. Today I want to talk a little bit about the in-person lab experience. Back in March when we first started all this, everything related to teaching had to switch to a remote delivery and online or at-home experience. And as we've transitioned through the months and the different rules in various places around the country, some of us have actually had the opportunity to bring students back into the classroom on our campuses. And I do teach a lab where that was possible. So I want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit today and tell you a little bit about what we've done and how things have been going. And I will be very honest with you. I actually didn't want to say anything about this until we had gotten through it. I kind of, a little bit of superstition and worried about jinxing the process too much if I were to talk about how things were going while we were still in the process. But luckily, we finished our last in-person lab last Wednesday. So we are now transitioning to the rest of the semester with final project write-ups and things like that will all be online. So I no longer have the worries that I had about bringing the students into the lab each week and how did we handle that safely. So just to kind of back up and start from where we started, we learned in the summer that we would have the opportunity potentially to teach in-person labs. And so we started planning. And so with our planning, we had to come up with all the safety measures that would fit the university's requirements and CDC requirements and work a situation where our students could come into the lab in what we believe to be a safe manner. Different laboratories have different facilities, and that obviously affects the ability to do this. So what we did for the lab I teach, it's a course-based undergraduate research lab for freshmen. So that's already going to have certain, unique properties to how we handle these sorts of situations. And so what we first did was we looked at the facility. How many students could we bring into the room? The room is actually a 24-person room originally. We use it in the Cure setting as a 16-student room because we need a little more space for common supplies and equipment and things. And so we looked then at, what was necessary for the distancing and all of that in this room and how many students could we accommodate. And as it worked out, we saw that we could include 8 of those students at a time with a TA and maintain 6-foot distancing between all persons at the same time. So we came up with a seating chart that allowed us to accommodate 8 students in the room as well as the TA with those 6-foot distancings being maintained. We made it a little more complicated than that because we actually took a 16-person section that we'd already registered, split them into 2 groups, a group A and a group B that met for half of our lab period, and group A came and then swapped with group B, but we had it so that they weren't in the same seats, so it staggered things a bit. So we made it a little more complicated because we had these A and B groups sharing equipment drawers, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't using them back to back. And so that kind of staggered and alternated the use of those drawers throughout the day. So we had, in this particular section, 3 different course sections. Those were actually back to back throughout the day, but then we would alternate A, B, A, B, A, B through each of those sections as the day progressed. We instituted our disinfection plan so that every piece of equipment was disinfected by each student before they left. Of course, we're a microbiology lab, so we were already disinfecting our lab bench and things on a regular basis. So that was nothing new for us. The things that were new, of course, were the distancing. Students no longer moved between desks to go get supplies or equipment. They actually, once they came in and prepared for the day, they went straight to their desk and they did not leave it. So that meant that we had to plan out how we would do our experiments differently. Some experiments had to be changed so that they could be completed with the supplies we could put at the desk for that particular day. Some things needed to be changed so that the TA completed particular activities such as centrifugation or things for the students at the end of class so that we didn't want the TAs going from desk to desk either throughout the day. So all of those things required us to rethink all of our, procedures. But we came up with our plan, and we were able to then implement that to follow it on a, progression through the semester. They've accomplished the same goals that we wanted for our students in terms of what techniques they were learning, what they were producing in terms of results. All of that was built into this plan. And as of last week, we got through those goals successfully. These were all the things that we needed to do. This particular project has certain products that we want the students to get to in terms of their experimental results. And we got to all those. In fact, we got to those faster in many ways than we normally do. And we got probably as many or more good products at the end in terms of the quality of the samples that we can then use for things like DNA sequencing, which is one of the next steps that happens after the students finish their work. So in terms of, did we do what we wanted to do? Absolutely successful. Did we do it safely? Absolutely successful. We had no known cases in our lab, and something that I think our campus has not experienced to date is there's been no known transmission inside a classroom. So obviously we have students and staff in our campus that have become positive during the semester, but most of those, it looks like the chain of transmission is happening in the community, some in other on-campus locations, but not in classrooms. So we've been very happy with that, and I think our safety plan was very big part of that, because not only did we have the safety, the distancing, we had the disinfecting, we also had our students all wore safety glasses throughout the time they were in the room, and all of that seems to have been successful. So that's the big positive. We were able to bring the students in. We were able to do what we wanted in terms of giving them hands-on experience and getting the products that we wanted them to get to, and doing it safely. Now, it was not the normal experience. We know that things were different. We had to train them differently. We did things like all of our safety training happened before they came to class. And I will try to put in a few snippets of some of the safety training videos that I made. We had to do all of our pre-lab instruction through videos. So we weren't able to take a student and demonstrate in the lab as they were preparing to do something, which was sort of the normal way we would do it. We'd have them read a protocol, we'd demonstrate portions of that protocol, and then they would do it in the past. Now what we needed to do is we needed to have them read the lab manual, and then when they had done that, they would watch the video of demonstrating the procedure, and then they would come and they would do it. So we had them for a smaller amount of time in lab every day, and it was really work time. It wasn't teaching time. That was all happening before they came into the room. And so that was a change and required the creation of brand new videos to just do that. So that's one of the things that I knew in advance what we would be trying to do. I spent a big chunk of my summer doing the experiments and videotaping myself, because at the time I wanted to do those videos in a safe manner. So that meant I did the video, I did it in a room by myself, I set up the cameras, I did the experiment and worked through the whole process. And that all was done in advance. Those videos were made in July and August for experiments the students sometimes didn't get to until October. But that was part of this planning that was necessary. So that's a big part of this. Planning, knowing what to expect. And I know that's been a big thing this year. We don't always know what to expect, and things change very rapidly. So when possible, I was able to plan, do the videos. I didn't have to process those videos right away, which was a good thing, because I couldn't have made videos for, I don't even remember the total number of videos I ended up making for the semester, but it was something like 12 to 15, specific procedural videos that I had to go over with the students so that they could practice that material before they came, or see that material before they came to lab that day. So that's a lot of planning, but it seems to have worked well, and it's just been different. So troubleshooting was quite different this semester. We would normally have students just repeat their work if something didn't work right the first time, and then they would just be at different points in the process. We couldn't do that this semester. We needed them to all be on the same step at the same time because of just the logistics of supplies and preparing things in the lab. So because of that, what we had to do is they would do the experiment, we would get the results, TA would look at those results and make decisions on if they were ready to move to the next step, then everything was ready for the students for the next time. If they weren't ready to move to the next step because something didn't work the way it should, the TA did the troubleshooting step. They repeated that and then gave the student the next set of results. And they were very transparent. The students always knew what had happened. They always knew what decisions had happened on their sample before they came in. In some cases, the TA was actually discussing that with them through email or other communications prior to the student getting those redone results. But that allowed us to keep all students on track. There was occasions where we had to give them a different sample. We had some extra samples left from the spring that hadn't gotten processed because we had to shut down the lab course at that time. So that gave us some backup samples. So those students just picked up where another student had left off if their sample just got to a point we couldn't move it forward. So we were able to keep all the students on the same step. All of them finished a sample. A handful of them finished someone else's sample. That is a little different from the terms of their ownership in the project, but they still did the work. They still see the product, and they contributed to the greater scientific plan for that particular project. So I think all in all, it was a successful semester, and I said it at the beginning before we started that I had a couple of points where I hoped we would get to. There was a couple of stages in our process where if we got to that point, we could save a sample. And so that was something like the first 4 weeks. If we could get through the first 4 weeks, we'd have samples that we could eventually process in the future. If we could get, to 8 weeks, we would have those samples at another stage that made them more, stable. And if we could get somewhere, the 12-ish week stage, we could actually get our major scientific goals accomplished. And then the rest of the time we just needed for wrapping that up, getting the students to write, papers and presentations on their products. And then it would be great. And we got through everything. We got all the way to the point where the students completed all the scientific steps that they needed in their samples. And now they're, electronically archiving things, writing their papers, preparing presentations, and will meet all of our goals now without having to go back into the lab for the remainder of the semester. Which just again, that's as we get into the late fall is a good thing. As we know, this respiratory disease is spread more easily this time of the year. We already have this highly contagious pandemic going on, so by getting to the point we're at now, I don't have to bring those students into the lab anymore, but we've accomplished all the goals we wanted, and they're continuing with their education and completing some of the non-lab-based goals that we wanted to do, which is communicating their science and preparing now for what will be our next semester, which is an online completion of the remaining analysis of their DNA sequences that they're going to get from the samples they did this semester. So I'm very happy with the progress that we've made, and I know that this is going to vary tremendously between labs and what you're trying to accomplish and what your situation is in your local area and on your campus. But we were able to get through the in-lab portion safely and productively. And so that was a very good thing. And we'll try to do it again in the spring. That's the plan. If nothing else changes, we'll be moving into the same type of a process in our spring semester with a new group of students who are going to go through this project as well. So I would love to hear back from others of you who've done on-campus labs. If you have things that you would suggest that you would add to this idea of how to do it safely and productively, and put things in the comments, and we can start a dialogue hopefully. And I'm hoping the rest of you are having a successful semester. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode, and I want to thank you again for watching, and I will see you soon.